Welcome back to Invalid Entry. My name is James Taylor. It is Advent of Code, and today we're looking at more reasons to hate XML. This one's quite a fun one. This is external entities. When you're looking at XML defects, you have to really look at the library that you're using. These are issues with the XML standard, with the specification of the language, with the specification of how a perfectly compliant XML processor should obey the standard. And what you actually find is on the previous one, the XML expansion that I did a few days ago, you'll find that there actually are a lot of XML parsers are vulnerable to it, no matter what language you write in. This one is a bit different in that you often find this is turned off in the parser. The parser won't be vulnerable to it. But people turn it on because they want to use this particular feature of the language, not realizing what the side effect of what they're doing are. And what this is something called external entities. So here we have in front of us, I've already set up an XML parser. I'm using a slightly different one to last time. I'm using a sax parser in Python because the sax parser has the ability to turn its feature on. So I've got a bit of XML in front of me, and what we're going to do is see parsers, and I've just printed it off below in a nice way. So we're going to introduce a doc type into this now, which is part of the XML standards. It doesn't really do anything. It defines the document type, which is fine. And in the document type, we can actually define an entity. So this is looking very familiar from last time. So I can just do hello world like that. That should be about right. And then here, if I do ampersand, there we go, d colon, you can see that it's done an injection of that. The entity has been injected incorrectly. That itself is not a vulnerability. That itself is working as intended. So you can put things in there. Sometimes we want to include entities from other files. So we may have some kind of XML system where we have, let's say, like a definition of something in one file and we want to include it onto the next file. And XML has a feature for this. So the way this works is you can specify your entity. So for example, my picture, it might be some binary picture. And then you can basically say it's coming from the system and it's coming from some system file. And you may put a relative path or an exact path, whichever you're doing. So you say my data slash some image.png. And there you may to encode this, probably a C data, or you might just do a bit more work. The problem with this is, though, it actually could be misused straight away. So if you've got the ability for someone to add XML into your system, and a lot of enterprise businesses will do this. A lot of industrial places will send files between companies which are XML files, legacy systems, things built in the late 90s, early 2000s. XML was the rage. XML will solve all your problems, they said. So everything used XML to transfer data. And a lot of these are SFTP uploaded, drop a file in, and what we find these days is a lot of these SFTP endpoints, they have well-known usernames and passwords. A lot of people know the password. It's very well-distributed knowledge. So you just open them up, drop an XML file in, and it runs. And often it drops the output file either onto a web page or it drops the output somewhere like on a reply file. So you get the output straight back from your system. So anywhere where you're allowed to mess with the doc type, anywhere you're allowed to introduce entities, attackers might try this as a thing. And if it's turned on, this can be any file in the file system. So it can be, for example, /etc/password, which is a file which pretty much every Linux and every Mac has. So I run that now. What happens straight away if I actually have it correct? I put in my picture. So it's now got to be ampersand my picture because I changed the name of it. Okay, run that. And what you now have is just opened up my password file and it started dropping every single user on my computer into the output there. So on its own, what you often find is you find somewhere where you have a process, either a web upload, a file upload, or some kind of file in, file out system, where the errors are returned to you. And a lot of systems, for the help of integration, will return you the errors. So you know what, as an integrator, you know what you're doing wrong. In security, if you're writing secure systems, there's a contradiction there between developer experience and integration experience and security. In a secure system, you don't give any feedback to anybody getting anything wrong. You just say, that was wrong. Right. But in an integrator-friendly system, you go, that was wrong. You've got the wrong data type. Or that was wrong. Here was a more detailed error to help you diagnose that without having to make a support ticket with the vendor or the supplier or whoever. I've had very big debates with teams in the past about which way we should go on these things, and I see both sides of the fence. I do. I generally err because I try to write secure or sensitive systems. We try to err on that side. But it can be hard then for integrators to come along if all they're getting is a single error code or the word error. It is difficult then for them to diagnose. You do have to output that somewhere. So there we go. The way to do this is not to turn on. Just to be clear, I had to explicitly turn on this external entity handling on here to be able to do this. But you do find in a lot of situations either people put the allow doc types to be imported or they allow external doc types. This is very standard as well. Say, actually, I'm not going to have this. I'm actually going to have my doc type, my DTD allowed to be external. So I have a single DTD and then the rest of it's internal. That's a slightly different attack if your doc type is external. But it is still a problem because if you're starting to reach out, you're starting to expose information to external entities, external organizations, malicious actors about how you're processing the data inside the business. As a rule, don't turn that on. Use a parser where it's not turned on. If you actually look up in your language, you often find there is like a language. Here we go. Here's the Python library. It is how to process XML, all the sub-libraries in here. And as you go into it, it's actually got in sections specifically on XML vulnerabilities. And here you see, here are the inbuilt different libraries that Python has for parsing it. And you can see that these ones are vulnerable to the billion last, which is expansion. Just going use the entities over and over again. A quadratic blowup is actually a slower version of that, and it's actually worse than billion last in that it's harder for a parser to spot it, but you don't get quite the scale. So last time I was showing like a 48,000 time multiplier of scale. These ones you basically upload a gigabyte file and it expands to like a 5 gigabyte file. So you only get like a 5-time expansion, but it does allow you to use up 5 gigabytes of memory at a time if you upload a 5 gigabyte file in the first place. And these ones down here have generally been made safe. DTT retrieval and expansion have generally been made safe. Noting that these ones in here can be turned off, and some people do turn it off because they think they have a legitimate business reason. If you have to turn it off, you have to work harder to guarantee where the XMLs come from. Do you trust the source of the XML? Has it come from a trusted system? Has it been signed by some process before you pass it as XML? Have you got a hash of the file to make sure it hasn't been tampered with? There are techniques you can do, but fundamentally, if you're loading in XML from an unsafe source, you have to know about it. Some people then go, well, what is a safe source of XML? Well, sometimes people use configs as they have XML as config files, and those are not just being loaded by the internet and not being uploaded from anywhere. They've been added by the sysadmin. Say this is the database config, this is whatever. Those would be classed as safe sources because they're known to have come from the they couldn't be injected by some method, and that's the difference there. But in those situations where you've got a config file, do you really need to have external entities? Probably not. So just be really careful about turning this on. I would say it probably doesn't need to be turned on in most situations. I think it's very, very rare you're going to find a case. Better solution, don't use XML. I keep saying that. If you have the choice, if you're a system architect, if you're a systems designer, say, hey, can we use JSON, can we use YAML, can we use another data language? Do that over XML. You'll find the performance to be better, and you'll find it doesn't have the same attacks as this. That's all. If you're enjoying these, please hit like, please hit subscribe, and I'll see you all tomorrow.